back. Hello, my friends, and welcome back. To start off, thank you so much to those of y'all who left me very kind 5-star reviews on Apple and Spotify and who subscribed to the YouTube channel. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It was very generous and kind of you to leave those. And it's helpful for me. So it makes my podcast more discoverable for families looking to leave the system. So I appreciate that so much. Also, I am right now working on a video, a more robust video that will be on YouTube only on, it's a kind of a comprehensive guide to deschooling, because I get that question often. And quite frankly, for as nice as the deschooling videos are that are on YouTube, I feel like so many of them miss the mark and don't really address the concerns of those of us who actually left the system or have left the system with kids that are older, as opposed to being in elementary school, or, we started our kids when they were babies. So that video is coming out. The research has been done, which is usually the thing that takes me the longest. It's just a matter of recording this week. So that will be happening and being released by the end of next week. So after editing. So if you are brand new to homeschooling, that video will definitely be for you. Also, if this is your first time listening, or you're a few episodes in and you're thinking about pulling your kids in the fall, you're brand new to homeschooling, my suggestion would be to listen to this podcast from episode 1. The first about 20 episodes go through our family's journey leaving the system and the concerns that came up as they came up, which I found is pretty typical for most people. And so I go in order of the different concerns that are going to run through your mind, because they ran through mine, and they run through everyone that I know is mine. So if this is your first time to this podcast, you can listen to this episode. It will be helpful. It might be a little bit overwhelming for you. So I would suggest listening from episode 1, where we tell our story, and then we go in order of, okay, now this is deschooling, and now this is, these are things that people are going to say to you, and now this, here's the next thing. And so that tends to go in order. So listen in order. That will be very helpful for you. All right. A few weeks ago, I talked about we deschooled, now what? And then I talked about like easing into the school year from that point. Like, you've deschooled, now how do you start adding things in? But now shout out to Annalisa for bringing up this question. How do I this upcoming school year? What school supplies do I get, and things like that, which got me thinking about. I wanted to go a little bit more robust into those of us where we've deschooled, we've then moved on to the next section of doing a little bit more robust schooling. But as this week, I've been planning for the upcoming school year. I signed my kids up for their enrichment activities a couple months ago. But as I'm going through, and I'm like, there's one of my daughters is still on a waiting list for an enrichment program I really want to get her into, that she wants to get into as well, that I'd have to pay out of pocket for, but I'm okay with that because I feel like, this would be a good thing for her. But it got me thinking, like, I ought to do a podcast episode not only on just school supplies that we're looking at buying and how do we decide what school supplies to buy, especially as they're all being put out right now and all the lists are going out to the families in the public school system, which, by the way, I must say, one year I spent over $500 on school supplies because we had to get everything on the list according to how the teacher wanted it. It was like 3 red pronged, whatever. And then at the end of the year, they ended up using not using half of them, and I had wasted all this money, but I bought all the school supplies on the list, and gone were the days when it was like, you need a pencil, a school box, glue, and scissors, right? Those days were gone. We get back to those days as homeschoolers, of that simplicity of what we use for school supplies. But I will discuss school supplies at the end of this episode, towards the end of this episode. But I wanted to discuss the process that I'm going through actually right now. We are in the middle of this week on deciding what we want our homeschooling to look like in the fall. And you have to understand, for every homeschooler I have ever met, there's always this perpetual adjustment of like, okay, this worked this past year, this didn't work. What things do we want to change? Um, how can we do things better? Like there's a perpetual, like, how do we improve this for the next year? And unlike the school system where they can talk about it, but then really not much different can happen except for buying a new curriculum or, the school district adopts new textbooks. Um, as homeschoolers, we are, rather than being like big barges that have to move in the water, we can adjust quickly and shift quickly like speedboats, because it's just our families that we have to worry about. And so every year I do go through this process of, okay, these things worked and these things didn't work. And what I found is that I do have a common thing that I do, which I didn't realize that I was doing it until I thought I should do a podcast episode on this. And I started putting it actually on paper, and I thought this would be helpful for you. So I want to talk with you about our process and the process I'm going through right this second with my kids as we're preparing for the school year. And so to do this, I want to bring up, and I've shared the link in the show notes. Anything that I reference, almost anything that I reference, I put in the show notes. Sometimes I forget and don't include bits and pieces. But I try to put everything in the show notes, which you can access on Apple or Spotify or any of the other, Castbox, any of the other major platforms. It's in the show notes on YouTube as well, of things that I reference. So I want to reference today a video that was done in the 80s, and it's like a 4-minute video. It's very, very short. I would suggest watching it. I'm just going to give you a brief synopsis of this episode, of this video. So it's Stephen Covey, who wrote the very famous book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And in this video, he pulls a lady up on stage, and he has this big jar with and he pours all of these pebbles in and says, these are our, daily tasks and little things in life. And then here's these rocks, these big rocks. And this jar represents our life. And these big rocks and all these little pebbles represent everything that we have to get done in our life. So I've thought about this in homeschooling. He brings the lady up and he pours the pebbles in, and it's the day-to-day stuff that they get lost, lost in. And then he says to the lady, I need you to put these big rocks in. So here's one rock is home and family. One rock is your children. One rock is going on vacation. And these are big, important rocks that people don't want to miss out on. And he says, and the jar is full of all the little pebbles that he had poured in. And he said, now fit these rocks all in. And she can't do it. All of the rocks don't fit. So he gives her another jar, and she takes the big rocks and she puts the big rocks in first. And then she pours the pebbles in, and the pebbles fill up in between the rocks. When I plan homeschooling, I think of it much like that jar of like, what are the big rocks that are non-negotiables, that are things that are the most important things to me and to my children to do? And then what are the other things that are not quite as important? They're still important. Like, I still need to fit them into our homeschooling, but they're not as important for us. And those become the pebbles. And so as I'm planning the homeschooling year, that's how I think about things, is like, what are the big rocks? What are the non-negotiables? And then what are the pebbles that are not as important? So I want to walk you through this, as well as some of the steps that I take in determining some of those things. So the first thing that I do is I interview my kids at the beginning of the year and at the end of the year. And actually, we kind of very loosely homeschool through the summer. Like, we just got home from a family vacation. I had pre-recorded the last week's episode and had it going so that I could go on vacation with my family. And it gave me an opportunity to, Jacob said to me, Mom, do I have to do any quote school work for the rest of the week? Because we got home last Thursday. Wednesday. And so Thursday, Friday, he's like, do I have to do any schoolwork? And I was like, no, that's fine. And so we're starting back today with the very basics. And when I say basics, I mean, we're talking very limited, like it's almost like we're deschooling, right? We do reading, writing, and a little bit of math. And half the time they only get math in like once a week during the summertime. But I choose a specific like official start date. In a future episode, I'm going to talk about the fear of missing out. And one of the things that I found that I missed out on emotionally was like the first day of school and the things that come with that, where you take the first day of school pictures and all of that. And I actually missed that. And so I like to plan like an official, okay, we're officially going to start. We're loosely homeschooling this summer. It still counts as learning. Swimming lessons and things like that, they still count as learning, but we're going to have an official start date. So the first thing I do is choose like, this is the day we're going to go back to school. I do take back to school pictures with my kids. I still will put like what grade they're in oftentimes, grade. And I use that loosely, like, but I've never kind of shaken out of that part of the public schooling thing. And it's a good record for me to keep for my children when they're older. So we do put like, this is the beginning of the year picture. And I do get brand new school supplies for them that we don't use until the first day of school. But so that's the very first thing I do is like, number one, I choose like, this is going to be our official start date officially. And I let the kids know this is going to be our official start date. And it's going to be somewhat ceremonial, right? In our heads, we go, okay, this is like a little mini rite of passage. Now here we start. Okay. So I choose that. Second thing I do, and it can correspond with the public school system. It's fine. It doesn't have to, though. You could start later. You could start earlier. It doesn't matter. Okay. Second thing I do, and I've just started doing this last week, is I sit down with each child and I interview them about what they liked from the previous year, what they didn't like, things that they really want to work on. And I brief them ahead of time. I'm like, we're going to be interviewing on the things that you want to learn about this year and things that you're interested in and things that you want to see or visit, places you want to visit. So be thinking ahead of time for our official interview. That gives them a chance to kind of think about, okay, what do I want to talk about? So I started with Jacob and he told me very specifically, I really want to learn some woodworking because I want to build a table, like a little table, and I want to build a chair. And so I'm like, okay. But we started talking about the things that were the most important things to him. He actually didn't have that many things that were super important to him, except for like woodworking, and he wants to go skiing. So I'm like, okay, awesome. And then we talked about some of the books that he wants to read, which, let's be honest, he said, I can't think of anything. So therefore, I started looking at, okay, what books do I want him to read? And I started going through different books that I felt like these are great character building books. These are different age appropriate books for him. There's some things that would be, I know would be above his level. Some of the books that I've chosen would would teach would teach about history and different things. So I start making a list. And I actually, during the year, I also look at good books that I'm like, oh, I want to make sure I get that and to read aloud as a family, or that would be a good book for this child to read. It would be where they are at their reading level, and it'd be a good book for them. So I choose 12 books for read aloud for my kids, and then I choose 12 books that I want them to read that are chapter books. Now, of course, for my youngest, who's 8, they're very short, like The Courage of Sarah Noble, which is a really, really short chapter book that she and I would read together, and it didn't take us a whole month to read it. But it's roughly one book a month for the year, and if they go through them faster than the year, then great. If it takes them longer, then that's fine. but I found that I choose 12, one for each month. Same with Read Aloud. We choose one book per month. So first thing is I set a date of when we're going to start. Second thing is I interview each child on their interests and the things that they really don't want to miss out on or the things that they really want to do. I've already planned their enrichment activities. I have to do that several months before. So I'm thinking about that throughout the school year. In some cases, like I'm scrambling to try to get them into certain enrichment programs. And so for those of you that are new, an enrichment program is a program that happens once a week for homeschoolers. That can include co-ops too. So I'm thinking like, what co-ops do we want to join, or do I need to start a co-op around a certain subject? Even yesterday I was thinking, man, I really want to do field trips this year. This last year we didn't do very many field trips. And I use the term field trips because that's what you and I know. That's the term we know. But it's essentially like at home, discovering what you've got around you and the really cool things that your city or your state has to offer that you can do in a day. But I started thinking, I really, really want to do field trips and create a little mini co-op field trip / experiences once a week. Okay, so again, so I interviewed Jacob. I chose the 12 books that I want him to read for his quiet reading time, which we call QRT. So that's checks off that reading every day box. And then I've been working on making a list of what are the 12 books that we want to do as a family read aloud that would appeal to all of the kids, which we end up inevitably going through way more than 12 books because we'll listen to Audible books in the car. And then there are books that I'll read at home. And usually we're simultaneously reading multiple books. Like I'll have one book that we listen to in the car and then one book that we read at home because my kids really enjoy reading together. Okay, so that's the next thing we do. So back to the rock analogy, I want you to think of like, what are the non-negotiable big rocks that you have to prioritize? That's what we're going to put in the jar first. So these are some of the big rocks for us. These are activities that have to be consistent, that we have to be committed to, and a lot of times cost money. So lessons, for example, would be a big rock because it's something that you're gonna have to do every week. And if you're sit down and you really determine that that's not something that's super important for your family, then get rid of it, right? Like we ended up getting rid of piano lessons. I know some of you are like, what? Why would you do that? But I realized that was not, I got frustrated with that. There was another activity that we did last year that for PE that we did once a week that was expensive, but I liked the class once we got there, but it was a long drive for me and the kids really liked it, but they didn't love it. And so I talked to the kids and I talked to Jacob, who's Kara, and Jacob would go to this class once a week. And I said, how much do you guys really like that class? Because it takes up a lot of time in the week. And I like to have lots of white space in my week. I do better if there's flexibility and we're not overscheduled. So they said, we don't really love that class. Maybe we could do it again next year, but not this coming year. So I eliminated that class off the schedule and it's no longer a rock because once you commit to those classes and you're paying for them every week, you're paying for the cello lessons or you're paying for the orchestra, you're more committed and you have to decide, is it really worth it? Is the time and the money and the effort really worth it? And it might be for your family. So you have to decide what those big rocks are. So the next thing I want you to do is make a list of what those big rocks are. Okay. For us, read aloud is a big rock. That's really important. It is important for me to read to my children. Why? Because nothing is more powerful to teach your children literacy and how to read than reading to them, which I've talked about many times in multiple episodes and dedicated the most important thing you can do that episode to reading aloud. Okay, so that's one of our big rocks. That's why I list the 12 books that they're going to read individually and that we're going to read as a family. That's one of our big rocks. Another one of your rocks might be an enrichment activity because it's something you have to do every week and it costs time and it's cost money. And I would wage that time is more important than money. But let's be honest, none of us have unlimited money except for maybe Elon Musk, right? So, but not all of us have unlimited time. Nobody. Like that's the great equalizer. So you need to decide what those big rocks are. For us, my husband and I, we had a skiing pass last year because half of my kids really enjoy skiing. It's Jacob's favorite thing in the world to do. And my husband loves to do it. So we got a season pass for last year and we were trying to go every single week. And I started feeling very resentful because I don't like skiing that much. I'm a good beginning skier, even though I've skied for many years. I'm not great at it. And I really don't want to spend extra time learning it. And so my husband and I, in April, we had to decide if we were going to buy the season passes or not. And we determined that he would get a season pass and he'd get one for Jacob. But for the rest of us, he'd get like a 5-pass pack. And we'd go 5 times, but he would make sure that he would take Jacob on a weekly basis skiing and work his work schedule around that so that that rock is filled for Jacob. But it doesn't then become a rock for the rest of us. Does that make sense? So rather than skiing be a big rock for the whole family, it is a big rock for Jacob and my husband. Okay, so I also started evaluating like tennis lessons. I realized are really important because I want to keep my kids physically active, and we live right by tennis courts that are open and available, and it's something that they can do as adults. So that became a big rock. Is like, okay, what are we going to do for physical education? Well, once a week they're going to go to tennis, and then every other day we're going to be playing outside, which we need to be playing outside anyway because it helps increase serotonin and dopamine naturally. And we need the outdoors. Children need the outdoors. Children need to play. So another big rock for us is PE. And then we talked, read aloud, writing, a little bit of math, their enrichment program. That's once a week. We have to be committed to it. We can't be flaky. My kids can't miss it. One of my daughter's enrichment program is a high school. It's an arts program where they put on a play at the end of the year, and it's important that she doesn't miss it because it affects the rest of the kids in the class if she's not there to learn her lines. So both she and Joshua were doing it this past year, and Joshua said, that's not an important thing for me. I would rather do something else. So that, again, that was a big rock for Katie, but it's not a big rock for Joshua. And so I had to go. And it does take a little bit of maneuvering, right, as we're working with multiple schedules. But I realized I had the ability to put all of their enrichment programs on the same day. So that's helpful. And so the big rocks need to be the things that are non-negotiable for you or for your child specifically, and things that you want to do or to experience as a family. So these are our big rocks. Quiet reading time. They have to read aloud. They have to write something, math, their enrichment program, and then religious studies and something physical for their physical education. Then this year I said, I really, really want a rock to be going on field trips and having hands-on learning experiences with my kids because we neglected it last year. And so I'm going to have to make that a priority. So I have to call it a rock. And so I yesterday made a list of everywhere that we haven't gone as a family that I've wanted to go to, and all of the activities that I want to do that we haven't gotten to, and some activities that we've done in the past, but I'd like to repeat because Kara's old enough to remember now, because we're going into year 5. And so we were at the farmer's market on Saturday, and I thought, man, I really would love for kids to learn about bees and honey, and I'd like to visit an apiary. I happen to have a friend who has several beehives, and she makes soap, and she's just remarkable. She has a little mini farm. And so I talked to her and I was like, if I got, could we come over and we'll, pay you to teach us these different things? And she's like, absolutely. And she homeschools her kids too, but her kids are she's got like 12 kids and her youngest is 14 or 15. So she said, absolutely. So I thought I'm going to put that on the list of field trips that I want to go on and things that I want to do. And then I'm just going to choose like my top, my top, 15 and then add to it. And I reached out to a couple friends and I said, hey, if I did a field trip, quote, co-op with just a couple families, would you guys be interested in joining? And they said yes. So that became another big rock is I want to do weekly field trips with my kids. Okay, so those are the big rocks. So my kids' weeks are going to be filled with doing quiet reading time, read aloud, a little bit of reading, a little bit of writing, a little bit of math, and their enrichment activities and their tennis lessons, because that's very important. And then for Jacob, come winter, we've got the rock of skiing as part of his physical fitness, which means he may not be able to go on all the field trips depending on the day. You see how I'm starting to juggle. But I'm trying to keep things as simple as possible. I don't like to fill our days all day or not. Like we do a couple hours a day of schoolwork, if that with carrots an hour, and then she plays a lot. But I want to make sure, okay, we've got one full day of enrichment activities. Tennis lessons are once a week on Tuesdays. They're playing outside. We're doing every day, like our actual academics are an hour to 2 hours, and then we fill the rest with their interests and things like that. So then what becomes the pebbles? What do we fill the rest of the days with once we've got those big rocks in? Because the big rocks, once they're in there, there's still a lot of space and time. And there's still, even when you put in the pebbles, there's still going to be some free time. So there's other things that I want to teach the kids, but they're not necessarily going to be a daily activity or daily for months and months and months. They might be like, I want to teach them this one thing, and it'll last like a month. And that's it. So it's more like a club. My friend Nicole Schiffler calls them clubs, where it's like an active, like something that they want to learn for a short amount of time over a month or two. And so she does that once a week. And so those are going to be the pebbles. What are the things that the pebbles that you're going to put in? Once you've put in the big rocks, you've scheduled your week, you're looking at it and you go, okay, here's my big rocks. Now, again, for those coming out of deschooling, this is a little bit more advanced than what you're just slowly adding little things, right? This is for people who we've been doing this for a while. Okay. So now I'm going to add in the pebbles. So these are some of the activities. These are activities that, again, they're not going to take the whole year, but I want to hit on them with my kids, and I don't want to do them every day. I don't have the patience to do them every day, nor do I have the organizational skills to do them every day, right? Because right now, our week looks like this. We're planning on Tuesdays being a field trip day, Fridays being their enrichment activities day, and then the rest of the days we're doing reading, writing, math, religious study, and playing outside and doing read alouds, right? That's it. There we go. And then we got their tennis lessons are in there once a week too. So here I've been explaining, you're probably like, oh, that's so much stuff. It really isn't. Like, but it's pretty simple. Like I go, yep, here's their enrichments on Friday. We're going to do field trips on Tuesday. They got their tennis lessons on Monday. And then every day we do a little bit of reading, a little bit of writing, a little bit of math, with the exception of the field trip day and their enrichment program day. Okay. But I want to teach my kids history. That's important. I also want to teach my kids civics, and I need to teach my kids the Constitution, and I need to teach my kids, I want to teach them about rhetoric. But all those things, I want to teach them about composers and music. And all those things don't take months and months and months. They don't. So what we're going to do is once a week, and maybe we just put it on the lessons day, we're going to add one of those things in, just once a week for a few weeks. And we're going to say, we're going to do this for 5 weeks or 4 weeks. And then we're going to move on to the next subject. So that might be that as I'm planning, I'm like, I've got to do grammar with Kara or with Katie and Jacob. So we're going to do grammar. I picked up a short grammar, a little help. It's not exactly a curriculum. And we're going to do that for 2 months. And we're going to do that once a week for 2 months. And I might add history because the grammar only takes about 15 minutes. And then we might add history, which we'll do for 15 minutes once a week for 2 months. And then the field trips that we go on are going to be talking about history anyway, because I want to go to all of the Colorado museums of history and all that stuff, you know. So the pebbles then become the things that you want to do, but you're only going to do once a week, and they're not going to take the whole time. Okay? Does that make sense? I promise it's easier than it sounds, because I have to tell you, I don't do well with complicated things. Like, that was one of the problems that I had when I first started homeschooling is I bought all these curriculums and I couldn't keep up with the curriculums because it was just too much for my brain to handle. But I can handle doing, okay, we've got enrichment activities on Fridays. We've got field trips that we're going to go on because this is super important to me this year. We didn't do it last year. We're going to do that on Tuesdays. We've got their tennis lessons on Mondays. And then once a week, we're going to have those little we've got their daily, you know, it's actually 3 days a week of math, reading, writing, physical activity. And then the other pebbles, we're going to add in history once a week for a few minutes. Again, did you hear? Minutes, not hours. A few minutes. Shorter lessons are better. Our brains retain things when they're shorter, not longer. So then we're going to fill in the rest of the time with the pebbles. And then we're going to leave a lot of free time for exploration and play. Like I said, on the 3 days a week that we're doing reading, writing, math, we're doing religious studies, we're doing physical activity, those activities only take a couple hours, and then there's plenty of time for play and for them to focus on their interests and for them to really do the things that they want. And their interests are actually become a rock. Like I said, we chose the enrichment activities for the kids based on their interests so that they could work on that. We did Kilroy's workshop last year in the fall because that was one of Jacob's interests, and that became a rock, right? Because we had to pay for it and it was weekly and we had to put it in there. Skiing come winter, that's going to be a rock for Jacob. So that's what we do. Now, that's enough, right? We've got it all planned. Again, the lists that I make are like, what books do we want to read per child? They each get 12 chapter books that they're going to read. What 12 books do we want to read as a family? And then what are their interests? When I have their little interview, I ask them, like, what activities do you want to do? What things do you want to learn? Jacob did tell me, he said, Mom, I really want to finish learning two songs, La Campanella and Fantasia Impromptu. He loves the piano. And so I need to let him have ample free time to work on that after we finish those big rocks in the day. Like, I've got to make sure, I guess technically another big rock would be like ample free time for them to work on the things that they love. And by the way, it gives me time to work on the podcast too, because when Kara's doing imaginative play or when she's working on one of her projects, because she's always working on a project, same with Jacob, like he's spending his time on the piano, that gives me a chance to do the things that I need to do as a mom that fill my bucket, as well as fill the needs that, like, I have to clean my house. And I still have to go grocery shopping. So we still have to live. So that making sure that there's ample free time. Again, if you're new to homeschooling does not need to take hours and hours and hours a day. It can take a couple hours in the morning and you're good. or it can take a couple hours in the afternoon. I had my friend Angela Winterton on, who works in the morning, and so that's her kids' free time. And then in the afternoon, when she's not working, that's when she focuses on the school part and her rocks with her kids. Um, so so that's how you can do it. Again, it's not hard. So some of the questions that I ask in their interview are what things do you want to do? What places do you want to go? What are some things that you're interested in? And I would suggest that you observe your kids. Like if they watch YouTube and you notice, oh, this is something that Jacob we talked about, is because I just did his interview last week, and he said, I I I want to learn how to train the dog, which made me chuckle a little bit because our dog is really, really old and approaching death, but he wants to train the dog. So that's something that he's been working on, and he's been watching YouTube videos on training the dog. And so as you're interviewing the kids, think back to what YouTube videos they've been watching that are how-to videos, right? And I'm not talking like how to get better in Minecraft or hacks for video games, but like what YouTube videos are they interested in? And maybe they're interested in coding, and it's legitimate. Like they want Minecraft hacks, but they also want to code. Okay, that can be a rock for them. They want to learn to code. There's one of their rocks. So for him, he's like, I want to learn to train the dog. Well, we added that to the list of things he wants to learn about this year. He brought up woodworking yesterday. So he's like, I forgot to mention this in my interview. I want to do woodworking. So I'm going to have to add that somewhere in there. And that will probably not be a full rock. It'll probably just be a pebble that we'll just do like a few lessons with how to use the equipment. And I've got to find somebody who could teach him for a little bit, and then he can make his projects and call it good. And then if it springboards into something more, great. Okay. So here's the list you want to make. Make a list of, if going on field trips is important to you, make a list of all the places that you want to go in the year, and then plan them out. List of all the books that you want to read as a family. Again, your rocks, you really should include reading, writing, and basic math as part of your rocks. We use CTC Math right now. I'm not affiliated with them. So if you hear this, I don't make money off them. As of today, I'm not making money off them anyway, advertising. But we use CTC Math. They do 10 minutes of math a day. We write something every day. We usually do dictation, narration, or copy work, which I've talked about before in the writing podcast. And then we've got so I make a list of all the books they want to read, things that they want to do, and then we work it out. Okay, so let's talk about school supplies. My friends, you don't need that many school supplies. You don't. I do like them to have school supplies at the beginning of the year because it's new and it's fresh. So I always buy pencils. I always buy new pens and some glue sticks. Then I buy 3 notebooks, 2 to 3 notebooks per child that are the same color. So that way I don't forget whose is whose. And one of the notebooks I use to record what they do every day for legal purposes, so that it records their attendance, as well as for my state, the attendance, as well as the activities that they're doing and the learning that's happening. So if the state were ever not knock on my door and say, hey, Janae Daniels, what did your child do? I can say, here you go. Here's each child's notebook. I talk about that in another podcast, the spiral notebook method. And then one notebook, and I have 1 to 2 notebooks, depending on how much they write, like for writing. And math we do online. You could have a notebook for math if you do a written curriculum. That's fine. So those are the basic supplies I buy every single year. As soon as they go on sale at all the stores, that's what I get. Now, on top of that, it's really simple. Like school supplies don't actually cost me all that much. I like to buy the books that we're reading if I don't have those books and I know they're good. if I've never, like, if I've heard they're good and other parents are like, yeah, they're good, they're appropriate, a lot of times I'll just check them out from the library. So if you're tight on money, you don't have to buy those books. Just go to the library. It's a free resource. And check out the books for your read alouds and for their daily quiet reading time. Check them out from the library. Super easy. Now, 4 years ago, when we started homeschooling, one of the things that was on my list was teaching children how, like, the electoral college works. And here we are in an election year again. And so I wanted to teach them the Constitution and things like that. And so I ended up buying some games that would help with the learning process and make it more fun, because we learn through play, as Dr. Gray mentioned many episodes ago. Because that's how, as human beings, that's how children learn. They learn through play. And so I found, like, okay, there's certain things that I want the kids to learn. And so I bought like an addition math game called Swamp Sum or Some Swamp. I can't remember the name. I'll put the link in the show notes. And it's a basic math game. And Kara still loves to play it, even though she's into multiplication now and division. But for the electoral college, I found this game, and I'll just show you this game to you. It's called The Presidential. And then I also got Constitution Quest, 2 separate games. But the Presidential explains how the electoral college works, but it's a strategy game. And it mimics the actual process of the electoral college. Like, it's super cool. And I remember that my teacher, when I was in 7th grade, to teach us the electoral college, had us play this game that she had created. Well, now there's a board game. I mean, that was umpteen years ago. Now there's a board game where it does it. And man, my kids learned the electoral college really fast and how elections work really fast from that board game. So that became one of our school supplies. 4 years ago, when we were like, okay, we're going to learn about birds, I bought a couple sets of binoculars, and I bought some field guides, which this summer, as we've been doing fishing, as Jacob's been fishing, I bought some like fish field guides for Colorado so that he could look up what kind of fish he caught. So field guides might be on your list of school supplies. Whatever the interests, the child's interests are going to inform the school supplies. They're also going to inform, like, whatever things that are important to you as a family are going to inform what things you buy as school supplies. Again, what you only really need are paper, pencil, some glue sticks. You probably already have scissors at home, and then 3 notebooks per child. Right. But if you want to do other things to inform, then yeah, get more things. Art is super important to us at my house. So I buy real art supplies. When it comes to like tools for your child, don't buy them the kids stuff. Like, teach them how to use real tools. I'm teaching a couple girls and my daughter basic sewing. They don't use a pretend, like, cheap $20 like kids sewing machine from Walmart that doesn't actually work. I teach them on a real sewing machine. Kara is 8. She can use it. I learned to started sewing when I was 6. I broke my machine like 3 times because my mom didn't want to actually show me how to use the machine because she felt like I was too young. And so I tried to figure it out on my own and broke the machine 3 times. I also learned how to fix it 3 times. As a 6-year-old, I figured those things out, right? And so my mom realized, oh, you seriously want to learn how to do this. So I started lessons. Kids want to use real tools. I use real knives in the kitchen with my kids. Now, when Kara is now to the point that she doesn't need a glove, but I bought like a specialized glove for children to cut with so that she'd use a real knife. Like, the tools that my kids learn on are real tools, because kids know very quickly that they're not, when things are not real. I don't buy cheap watercolors. Like, I buy legitimate watercolors, and I buy watercolor paper for them. I buy a mixed media art paper for them. So if you're like, I want to do more art with my kids, well, get them some decent art supplies. Don't get them Crayola or rose art. Get them like some legitimate watercolors that are good. You can get them off Amazon or wherever. Get some a legitimate set of watercolors, and then get mixed media art pads, which you can get from Walmart, and they're not super expensive, but they'll be able to hold the pigment and the paint and things like that. I bought a scroll saw one year because I wanted to teach them basic woodworking. And this is before when Jacob was really little and he wasn't interested. So I can teach him some things on that scroll saw. I don't have the other saws that I necessarily need. And so I'm going to have to find somebody who can help us with. But buy real things, real tool. Maybe you give it to them for their birthday or for Christmas or whatever. Or maybe you can't afford all of the tools of all the things they want. So buy one. You can't afford all the games. So choose one and get the games and the tools that are real, that would help them to learn what they need to learn. Does that make sense? Like, so that's the other thing with the school supplies is I get them the real deal. But I don't just buy things to buy them. I only buy things that will inform the learning that we've already planned. I learned that the hard way the first year when I bought a telescope and a microscope, and that was 4 years ago, and we finally just used them this year because I thought, oh, I'm going to do, I think I might need them, when in actuality it didn't really inform their learning at all. It didn't coincide with our big rocks. And so we ended up never using them, and it was a big waste of money. So choose, again, all you really need is paper, pencil, some notebooks, and glue sticks and some scissors. And then beyond that, get them real tools based on what things you are the big rocks that you plan on teaching them, or games or things like that would help inform the learning that you're going to use more than one time. Deductive and inductive reasoning skills, which is why people say that we should do upper level math games. And I talk about this when I talk about math in an early episode. There are strategy games that teach inductive and deductive reasoning without children crying, because they have to learn a quadratic equation. And so we have a lot of those types of games, a lot of inductive and deductive reasoning games. We have tons of games. Like, I've been over the last 4 years, we've collected games. So those also can be school supplies. And so the school supplies really is dependent on what your family needs, not what not what some teacher says they're going to need for their class that you end up not needing. Okay. So it's very simple, and it doesn't have to cost a lot. Notebooks are, they're like $1/4 this time of year. You can get them for super cheap, and you might need 3. And pencils and pens and glue sticks are cheap. Art supplies, again, you make the investment if that's something that you want to do and the kids want to learn, is art supplies. But you don't need to go out and buy a million school supplies. I mean, you just don't. I did invest in really good markers for my kids. Katie does a lot of art, like a lot of art. So I did invest in some more expensive, like alcohol-based markers and watercolor markers, and then just plain markers. Kara is fine with the Crayola markers. And so she's like, I like just the Crayola markers, so I'm good with those. But again, I don't spend a lot of money on school supplies. I don't. So there we are. My friends, I want you to think about what your big rocks are for this upcoming school year. Choose the date that you're going to start officially. Interview your kids, make the list of what your big rocks are and what your pebbles are, and plan accordingly. If you want to do experiences, list where you'd like to go, and then plan those out so that they actually get done if that's going to be one of your rocks. List out the books that you want to read, and then start checking those out from the library once a month. If you really love the book and you don't have it, it'd be worth buying it. And go get the essential school supplies and the real tools that they'll need on a as needed basis, not because you feel pressured to get them, but just because it will inform the learning. And again, you don't have to spend a lot of money. Remember the basics. We always want to stick to the basics. We want to go back to the basics because we want to fill our life with good things. Real quick story. We only have so much time in a day. That's it. And we all have the same 24 hours. Time is the great equalizer. So I started tennis lessons last year and I really enjoyed it, but then it became problematic during the school year because it interfered with when I took my kids to their enrichment activities. So I stopped tennis lessons. But while I was taking tennis lessons, one of the ladies in my class said to me, you should really join the tennis team. And the coach said, yeah, I really think you're getting good enough that you could join the beginning tennis team. And I said, well, how many days a week is it? And he said, it's only 3 days a week at night for 2 hours a night. And I said, that's great, but I only have so much time and I don't want to spend all my time doing tennis. I don't love it that much. I like it. I like it enough to do it once a week for an hour, but I don't like it that much that I want to spend 6 hours or more a week doing it. Remember that, like, we only have so much time on this earth. What things matter most? Those are your big rocks. Then decide what the pebbles are, and then let everything else go. It's not important. So that's what I want to leave you with this week. I hope I didn't confuse you too much in this episode. My brain was very scattered. I tried organizing it on paper, but I know that you're doing better than you think you are. Put the big rocks first. You got this, mamas, papas, grandmas, grandpas. Have a good week. If you enjoyed this today, please like and subscribe. You could also join our private Facebook group at School to Homeschool or sign up for our newsletter at www.schooltohomeschool. Have a great day.